So I'm Derek Regensberger. Welcome to another episode of the Clarinet Connection, your source for gear and product reviews and practice and performance tips for the clarinet. Today I have a special guest, Ryan Pereira from 3D Pereira Printing Products. And Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're a clarinetist, but how'd you get into 3D printing?
Hey, yeah, sure thing. Well, as you said, I am a clarinetist and got degrees in clarinet and clarinet performance and all that. But I grew up in a house of engineers, and so after a certain point, you kind of put two and two together. My brother is a mechanical engineer, my father is an electrical engineer. So growing up, I heard plenty about 3D printing technology, and eventually, I got to the point when I was in my undergrad actually, and I decided, well, maybe I should try to dabble things for myself and just see what happens. And in doing so, I was able to make a prototype using somebody else's printer. And it was a barrel that I made. So I modeled it on the computer since I was able to self-teach myself that prior to that. And the thing really, really played. Like it was really surprising how well this first prototype from this new technology that was not yet explored, how it performed. And I ended up using it on a wind ensemble concert 2 weeks later. In my college. So that was a really promising start to things. And then, I kept on building from there.
So tell us a little bit about 3D printing. Explain the process, and it sounds fascinating for making musical instrument parts.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something that's a little out there when see at a face value. I know things are very traditionalist in the industry, and so going off the rails with a new technology altogether is kind of something else. But 3D printing is an additive manufacturing. So whereas a lot of clarinet part manufacturing is subtractive, such as CNC technology, where you have a billet of wood or something, and then you would end up reaming it and cutting pieces away to make an object, is complete opposite, where you start from absolutely nothing, and then you produce a part layer by layer until you make up the full product. And so there's definitely some advantages to doing it this way, but the coolest part about 3D printing is that I feel is that I can really customize the inside of a part. Whereas when you have a block of material that you cut away from, it kind of is what it is, right?
Mhm.
And so having additive manufacturing, you could really customize the infill and the pattern that it does, that it uses in order to make the full part. And everything from the infill density to the infill pattern itself, there are a lot of different settings that you can really toy around with, but they have little minute impacts on how a product resonates and how it feels in response too. And so you could really kind of dial things in to another degree entirely, which is really, really cool with additive manufacturing like 3D printing.
So, how long does it take to make something? So, for example, a barrel versus an entire clarinet.
Yeah, you can really toy with settings so then it can go faster or slower. In general, if you make the print faster, then it tends to have higher layer height, so it goes quicker, and less resolution. So obviously, for um, very detailed parts like my own, I tend to have a very high resolution and a slower print process. But for something like a barrel, let's say, it's generally about 4 or 5 hours for a barrel. For a bell, depending on the thickness of the exterior, it could probably range from 7 to 11 hours. The full clarinet, I print them obviously in joints, and each joint between the upper and lower is a little over a day. Or
Wow.
yeah, it's quite an extensive process. But like I said, you really gotta get the resolution in there.
Okay. So, what was the hardest, aspect of the technology that you had to overcome as you're designing, something that really not a lot of people had done before in trying to make, musical instrument parts out of a 3D printer?
Right. So, well, from the technological standpoint, early on there wasn't really too many hurdles aside from being able to just kind of guess and test which settings work, which I guess that is a bit of a hurdle in itself. But the biggest hurdle probably came when I was manufacturing or started manufacturing full clarinets. When it comes to manufacturing the clarinet bodies themselves, there were a lot of things that I had to really take into account, such as the thin walls at the bottom of post holes, and when it comes with how make sure that it's airtight once you have between the bottom of the hole and the bore, and well, I guess sealing a joint altogether from the get-go was definitely something that had to really, you know, take notes and try a couple different ways of um, find the best way to overcome that particular issue.
A 3D printer, I imagine you've already got the holes designed so that it's just,
Yeah.
skipping where the hole would go. So does that make it easier to seat a pad, for example, than on a traditional wooden clarinet?
Well, I wouldn't. The way I do it, I do have the holes already in the model to begin with, but I essentially use them as a blank, and then I have various reamers and cutters where I fine tune the taper of tone holes and the seating of the pad. So it's generally in the ballpark once I have it in the model, of course. But then as far as seating a pad goes, I use tone hole refacers fairly extensively just to make sure that all those layer lines are completely smoothed out. And then I use also a sealant on the body too, which helps with that. Um, but yeah, so it's mostly just kind of used as a blank. And then it's a lot of hand finishing after the fact just to make sure you know, it operates exactly as it would on a traditionally made clarinet.
So the product that you get off the printer is more like a mouthpiece blank. You have to kind of do a lot of refinishing and handwork to finish the clarinet. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And the same goes for just making a custom barrel.
Fascinating. So what exactly are the products made from? I would assume they're, a similar material to like a buffet green line clarinet or the liner that goes in a Selmer Evolution. So tell me a little bit about that.
Right. So the main materials I deal with and what people reach out to me about would be the 3D woods that I produce. And so these are in-house made filaments, and I offer them in two varieties. One is 3D blackwood and one is 3D mahogany wood. And so 3D wood, from a bare bones perspective, is basically a wood composite. So the wood is shaved down into particles, into dust, very similar to the buffet green line premise. And then there's a binding agent that keeps those particles together, so then it could properly melt through the printer's extruder, and then go through the 3D printing process like any other filament.
When I've looked at your instruments, they tend to be a little different color than a traditional clarinet. Is that because of the binding agents and the other components that you have to put in there?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So compared if you put side by side with standard buffet R13 or E11, what have you, then it will be a little bit on the grayer side.
Hmm.
So the Blackwood is exactly, coming from an instrument such as an E11 R13. But then the binding agent will make the overall texture and look of it a little bit different.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the acoustical advantages or disadvantages of this kind of polymer-based and resin-based product.
Well, the main advantage is, well, we were talking how it's similar to Buffet's Green Line, right,
Mhm.
in material.
Yeah.
And so the main advantage that everybody points to with this sort of material is that, oh, it's not going to crack. It won't change. And that holds true with 3D woods. And so you don't even have to break it in at the start of it. So once you get a new barrel, you have to worry about going through your meticulous steps in order to play it in so then it won't change or crack on you 6 months down the road. That's no longer a factor with 3D wood. Another big thing is over the course of time, sometimes the bore will warp out of shape ever so slightly, and that's another thing that remains stable. It's as dimensionally stable as a plastic would be, which is really important for a lot of musicians, especially if you're in certain climates. If you're in Chicago and you deal with brutal winters, then I know that that's definitely something that comes to mind when you select equipment. You have to be very careful about that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can imagine that your products would be pretty popular with marching bands or Navy bands or something like that, where they do a lot of outdoor performances. Where are you finding you kind of serve your biggest niche right now?
Yeah, honestly, it's really all over the map because the way that I set my business model from the get-go was that it'll appeal to people of all walks of life, all stages of their career, because 3D printing really helps, bring costs down. And I feel like it's approachable to a student needing to upgrade to something that gets them to a better spot in regards to tuning or sound production, or it could be something that you can fine tune like any other product for a very discerning professional. And then more than anything, for college students who can't necessarily afford very high-end products, it makes things more approachable to, find the right barrel taper that'll really make their instrument sing. So it really does kind of cover a very wide variety of musicians, which I feel is really important to do in this day and age.
Okay. So what do you think the main advantages of your let's just take some of your accessories like your barrels and your bells. Why would a player choose your bell or barrel over, say, a wooden or hard rubber variety?
Well, yeah, like I was saying, the crack resistant advantage is definitely a big hurdle for a lot of people.
Hmm.
But more than anything, I also offer these in many different flavors. So the bore designs are, um, I have a wide variety of them that I offer for my barrels, for instance, and same thing for the bell flares. And so, as far as the material goes, you should expect that the sound to be one-to-one with traditionally produced woods. But more, it's more just finding, the right setup that clicks with you and that'll resonate for your setup. And so, I have, four different models of barrel, and I have three different versions of bell, which kind of cover a lot of ground as far as if you prefer something that's a little more focused and centered with a little bit more color in the sound, or if you prefer something that's more open, dark, broad of a feeling, um, for your particular tastes.
Okay. Um, One of the unique products that you make is a barrel extender, and I've typically seen these for E flat clarinets, where obviously there's some intonation problems that are well known in the E flat world. So, what's the justification for making one for B flat and A clarinets?
Right. Yeah. So the extensions, and basically for those who've not seen this product, it was developed by Clark Forbes a number of years ago for the E flat clarinet. And so he was the pioneer to, make that pretty much a must-have accessory for a lot of professional E-flat clarinetists, actually. And so this is basically to adapt the advantages of that to a B-flat and A clarinet. And I feel it really does make a significant impact on the B-flat clarinet in particular. It, it features a tone hole, obviously between the lower joint and the bell. So those long tube notes emit from the tone hole rather than through the bell. And so the things that you can really fine tune with that would be intonation, first of all. I mean, every clarinetist knows how low the low F, especially, and the low E can be. You can really help the 12ths between the low E and F versus the middle line B and the C right next to it. You could really make those a lot closer together and a lot more manageable, as opposed to, when it missed from the bell and then you have to deal with those low notes being so flat and sometimes the B and C being on the sharper end of things. Um, Another important thing that it does is it really helps you, well, what I like to call riding on the air when you cross the register break. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times there's such a huge, I don't know, of course, professional clarinets get used to, the transition between the throat tones and the clarinet register, but I feel like the longer tube allows you to kind of, channel the air through the instrument, and it helps you just make it a breeze going through that register break. And to a lesser degree, but still there, I feel like it also influences how you can use your air to enter the altissimo register too. It just makes things a lot more uniform and consistent throughout the range more than anything.
Okay. Since I purchased one from you, any installation tips as far as what direction should the little tone hole go? Does it point up? Does it point down? Does it matter?
Yeah, that I leave up to the customer for sure, because I like to mess around with that, and I mean sometimes with a different reed you say, well, actually I need a little bit more, cushion, and so I'll, have the tone hole point backwards or something like that. So I kind of leave that open-ended because it really does make an impact where that tone hole is placed. Typically my go-to is I keep it in line with the low E tone hole, and that's kind of my baseline. And then, like I said, if I ever read that requires one thing or another, I can, rotate it a certain way and it'll get a very, very slightly different response with it pointed a different direction.
For, let's say, a person that's coming from, a plastic clarinet or an intermediate clarinet like an E11, uh, how would the player, notice a difference? What's going to be kind of the main upgrade to going with one of your models?
Right. So, well, with one of my models, I took the liberty of being very particular about um, the finer aspects of clarinet design, and I really point to things like tone hole tapers and the board taper, of course. Now, the traditional clarinet design, it doesn't really vary much in the intermediate range. It kind of is more just like, I guess for lack of a better term, they want to make it a watered down R13 or something like that. And so I wanted to use a design that I know appeals to a lot of professionals. And the design in the bore is kind of like a French-German hybrid style of bore. And so this allows it to have a very uh, dark, well, not necessarily too dark, but it's a little bit more on the warmer end of things, and it really centers the sound extremely well. And so for people that are upgrading, I think it's really important to have something that does give you that sort of center and is not too open and really hard to rein in the sound. So I feel like that from a design aspect, that was one of my priorities.
One of the things I found is that they were quite free to blow, and they didn't have that kind of resistance or complete lack of resistance that you might see in some of the entry level models. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, that's also another important piece of the puzzle. So I don't want something that's going to be so hard to blow that it's like a foreign object entirely. But at the same time, I want something that you can have something to push against and be able to change colors with. I think that's also a really important piece of the puzzle. And so yeah, I want it to be free blowing, but also very centered and easy to produce the sound and flexible enough where you can get different colors from it. Kind of all wrapped up in a more affordable package than a lot of the top end horns.
Talk about the keys and the layout and that kind of thing. What do you look for when you're kind of putting together the complete package?
Well, the first thing that I want to look at was durability for for obvious reasons. And in this price range, you have a lot of people who are stepping up from a plastic instrument that are looking to really upgrade their sound and that sort of thing. And you have to be sure that students are it's going to be able to take any sort of abuse that may or may not happen to it, right?
Hmm.
And so I wanted the durability of the keys to be a big factor. And yeah, I'll be forthcoming in saying that it's actually Chinese key work. However, I went through so many different factories because there are many different factories in China that produce these, and I wanted to test their durability, how well it'll hold over time, how well they'll keep their fitting between posts over time. That was also another thing I looked out for, and of course, how it felt, the overall action. Not too foreign from buffet R13s or maybe Selmer prologues that some students are coming from. So then it's still in the range of what they'd expect the clarinet to be, um, but still be comfortable for them.
And what's the kind of the finish of the material? Are they, nickel keys, silver? What are they made out of?
The keys are nickel plated as of right now.
Okay.
I still have plans where I might offer them in silver in the coming months or years. But as of right now, I have them only in the one finish.
So what's next in your product development? You've made B flat and A clarinets and many accessories. Anything coming down the pipeline soon or new ideas that you've thought of to make?
Well, I'm still working with the extension that you mentioned and modifying the external shape and everything and trying to find the right uh, see how that impacts everything. Another thing I'm working on right now is actually a line of mouthpieces, and I've recently actually released a B flat and bass series of mouthpiece, and it's a collaboration with a Maltese craftsman in New York. His name is Mikhail Bartolomeo. The really interesting part is that it has just a really smooth finish, and you can basically use it as any other blank. It's not any different than if you were to be working on a Zinner blank as far as working on the material goes. The material sands fantastically. So I want to see if I can maybe dive into E flat design as well as saxophone. So I'll keep on working on that development over the next months.
Well, good to hear. E-flat clarinets are notoriously one expensive and two out of tune. So good luck on that project.
Yeah, it'll probably need it.
All right. Anything else to add?
Well, if you want to see more about the operation and everything, feel free to search me up. I have my website, Pereira3D.com. I also have a YouTube channel. You can search Pereira 3D Clarinet Services. Or if you want to find the Facebook or Instagram pages, it's just at Pereira 3D Clarinet Services or on Instagram at Pereira 3D.
Well, great. Well, it's been great talking to you, Ryan, and best of luck in the future. And I look forward to using your extension.
Thanks so much, Derek. Yeah, I hope you enjoy, and I really appreciate you having me on.